this seems like a legacy that needs to be retold. Um, it felt like a disservice that I didn't know who she
Mm.
was.
It's absolute pleasure today to be speaking with Emily Bett Rickards, the star of Queen of the Ring. Emily, thank you so much for the time. I genuinely appreciate it.
Oh, happy to be here. Can't wait to chat.
I love your work, first of
Thank
all,
you.
to let it be said, especially, in the Arrowverse, if you will. But
Awesome.
you're exceptional in this film, like really phenomenal.
Oh,
And
thank you.
what was it that excited you to take on the role?
Well, when I got the script, or my dog just woke up. When I when I got the script, I read through Mildred's story, and I thought, why don't I know about this woman? This seems like a legacy that needs to be retold. Um, it felt like a disservice that I didn't know who she
Mm.
was. I wanted so badly to know her story myself. I thought, well, this is a great reason to tell this story because other people need to know. And it was just so fun, to get to dive into her life and figure out who she was. And the more I did, I was just so inspired, and there was so much to her, and all the adversity that she stood up in front of, and every no that she took and made into just a pivot in her life. Like she was incredible, not only for the time, but timeless for now.
She really is, and I'm glad you said that about us not knowing her story because we know the stories of so many others that
Hmm.
she empowered, like Fabulous Moolah, Mae Young.
Yeah.
These are names that, if
Yeah.
you're familiar with wrestling, these are
These are the names.
the names. They are.
The
They
names.
really
Yeah.
are. Um, what impressed you most about Mildred? Because she's really remarkable in this film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one thing that's incredibly impressive, but almost more of like a spiritual download, is that she calls it a lunatic's dream, that she really shouldn't have been a wrestler because she knew nothing about wrestling. Women, it was illegal for women to wrestle. It was absurd for women to be at shows. The only women that were there were the girlfriends of the wrestlers. It was very looked down upon. Every time you walked into a show, you were sort of smirked at and catcalled and told to get out of there. She goes to see one show, and this is true. She goes to see one show and she's like, that's what I want to do. And I think she was watching men use their bodies in a liberated way, and not only that, entertaining a crowd. And she was like, I want to do that.
Mm.
And that also entailed putting muscle on when it wasn't cool, wasn't on vogue. It was getting strong, in a way to marry femininity and strength. And she was like, I think that those two things together strengthen each other and build each other up. And I just admire everything that took, you know?
I'm so glad that you said that because strength and femininity, you're right. Like marrying those two things,
Hmm.
like because she never loses either of those throughout the course of the film, in
Right.
more ways than one. Her physical strength and her emotional strength throughout the
Hmm.
course of this journey.
Well, they're
Uh,
intrinsically linked, right? Like I feel like they're not separate things. They are they are two parts that only work together. Separated, they don't work. Which is, I think, it's like so interesting when we talk about her and who she was, because she also did this all as a single mother. So I think she also believed that I I only get to be a single mother if I get to be a wrestler, and I only get to be a wrestler if I get to be a mother. She wasn't like I can only do one thing. She's like I get to have them both if I do both. Which is, I think we can think more like that in a sense. It obviously there's a ton of sacrifices, but those big things that built her were not the sacrifice. That's a part of who she was. That made her, right? So interesting when you kind of start to pick it all apart.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And thinking about this too, I grew up watching pro wrestling.
Oh,
It's so much fun, and
yeah.
but one of the things that I think that a film like this does is highlight is as a space to break boundaries,
Hmm.
which is not something you think about as a fan in general. But we see, starting with Mildred's story, and now WWE has had at least one all women's PLE and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and they're looking at possibly having more. But can you talk about that? What makes pro wrestling a space where we can break boundaries?
I don't know. I think that I think it's kind of a misfit space in a way. And I think that there's a real dedication to protecting one's own in there. That's the sense I get.
Mm,
Um, I think I'm speaking from personal experience. I've been so welcomed into that community, being such an outsider
mm,
from before. As an outsider, like I didn't know anything about wrestling at all. And so to be so welcomed, I really take that in stride. I'm like, oh, that's something I really pick up from this community. And these are the wrestlers that, specific wrestlers that I dealt with and welcomed me in and learned from and were inspired by. But I don't know. Maybe it's the emotional attachment and growth people get from sort of watching these sort of larger than life characters. Maybe it ignites something in people that um, we can sort of translate to our own lives. If it speaks to you, if wrestling speaks to you, I think it helps you in your life. And I
mm.
think that that's the power of storytelling, as well as I don't know, you have these incredible athletes on stage, there really is something to be said about using your body and feeling liberated in that way. It's like when a vocal artist really touches you, we don't go around using our full voice all the time, but when we hear a song that makes us cry, we're like, "Oh, that's using the voice, right? There's something that happens." So is wrestling using the body? Is it using the power of storytelling to touch us as well? It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable thing. Speaking of which, I have to ask you about the training because
Yeah.
you're in there with champs,
Champs, total champs.
total champs. AEW, WWE, you have who's
Yeah.
list in this. So, what sort of training did you have to go through, and what was it like stepping into the ring with them?
Well, a couple things. I mean, there's two different parts of the train. There's putting on all the muscle to kind of find Mildred's body. So not only does it look like I'm a wrestler visually for the audience, so we're not going like she doesn't wrestle, but also could help me find how Mildred sort of walked in the world because she had muscle on her back I didn't have, which makes your shoulders do that. She had more muscle in her legs, which makes your energy like a little lower to the ground. So finding out who she was energetically, that really helped. And putting on that muscle was, quite a dedication. But I had a team of people, Dr. Diego Bottizelli here in Vancouver, as well as Thomas Taylor. Um, Diego's also a nutritionist, so planned out big, big food plans, lots of protein, and training plans that would help me grow. So the idea was no cardio, lots of weights that could continue on until we got to the wrestling, the wrestling would pick up and be like a little bit of cardio in there. And when I got to Louisville, Kentucky, which is where we shot, we trained at OVW, which is a wrestling community there, which is iconic. It's led by Al Snow. So Al Snow and Dougie Basham were sort of our head wrestling teachers. You're only ever as good as your teachers, y'all. And also every wrestler at OVW that just sort of let me pick them up and throw them until I kind of got it right was a true help. Um, but learning how to run the ropes, take bumps, grab people in a safe way, throw people in a safe way, all that it was a learning curve for sure.
I can imagine. Oh man, like I just can't even imagine. Like I don't know how they do it. It'd be so tough. But I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you one more question here about
Sounds good.
one of the things that struck me about Mildred. I think it's her that says this line that says, "Only the dreams that we make come true are real."
Yeah.
And that's not something we usually, when we talk about dreams, we usually talk about
Mhm.
these things off in the distance, but that's a very grounded take. I was just wondering what you thought about that line and how it applies to her.
Something that I sort of recently was able to put into a different way of saying that is that I believe positive thinking is helpful, but I think positive action is meeting that in turn. And I think that that is kind of what she means. She's like, it's great to have dreams, but we also need to be actionable towards them.
Mm.
Um, it's kind of this talk about sort of manifesting, right? So like you can manifest, you can dream, but what are the steps that you're taking every day to get there? And I think she really did believe in that even if she's getting told no, she has the dedication to go forward. So if I meet no here, what are the avenues around this obstacle that I can keep moving forward? And I feel like that is intrinsic, like innately who she was. Um, but none of us are immune to self-doubt, right? And so I think she had this voice in her head that, when self-doubt was hitting, she really was just telling herself to get back off the mat. The dream was still pulling her in a way. So sort of to marry positive thinking and positive action, I think is really important for us. I think for me, I think it helps. It is it's also what keeps life exciting. You want to feel like you're moving towards something, not just thinking about it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Honestly, Emily, the film is wonderful. It is so good. And you are so strong and it's so powerful. And I mean that with your performance. I mean, you are physically, but I mean in your performance as well. It is just such a remarkable piece. Thank you so much for the time. I really
Oh,
do
thank you.
appreciate it.
So lovely to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Emily. Have a great day.
Bye, you too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.